He appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he had cast 7 devils. What does the word Mia mean? One. What does the word protos mean? First. So Mia means one, protos means first. I could say I have one son. That doesn't make him my first son. Well, yeah, that would. That's a bad illustration. It would. But you can use the word one in a different context than you use the word first. Right? Okay. So protos means first, not one. So when you go back and look at Mark 16:2, when did the ladies come to the tomb? Very early on one Sabbath. When did a Messiah appear to them? We're being told in verse 9 when he appeared to them. Very early on the first Sabbath. You got that? Verse 9 is not telling us that Messiah rose early on that first Sabbath. It only reads that way because of where the translators put the comma. There's a typo there. I put the word Mia there, but it's supposed to be protos. The comma being put where it was is an arbitrary act that does not accurately reflect what we've been told about the Messiah's death and resurrection. You do understand you can move a comma and change the whole meaning of a sentence. Right? I would, on the fly, just think of an illustration, but I've already messed that up, so I'm not doing that on the fly. We'll talk about that later. But you just by moving a comma, right, a sentence meaning can be changed. Same thing happened here. Here's what I mean when it says it does not reflect what we've been told. We have been told and know for a fact when the Messiah was slaughtered. He was slaughtered betwixt the evenings of Abib 14. He told us 11 times when he would rise. When did he say he would rise? On the third day. Not after 3 days. After 3 days would be 4 days. But he said, on that third day I will rise. Right? Yes. Well, if he was slaughtered on Abib 14 and he's going to rise on the third day, then 14, 15, 16 means he had to rise on Abib 16. You don't have to do any new math to come up with that. The ladies are at the tomb on Abib 17. Because we know on Abib 16 they went and bought spices. After the holy Sabbath of Abib 15. So now we let the passage say what it says. Verse 3 through 8, it tells us what the angel said to them. Verse 9, the Messiah's name is not even used. It literally says, now, and that word can be translated as but or and. It's the Greek word day. Now when risen, early on that one Sabbath, he appeared first to Mary. When did he do that? When did he appear first to Mary? Well, you can see in John chapter 20, go back and read it later. We'll actually read some of it here in a moment. He appeared to her first after she went and got Peter and John. When she saw the tomb was empty, she ran and got Peter and John. Peter and John come, see the empty tomb, don't know what to make of it. They go back to the house. She stays there. And that's when he appeared to her. Because she was very distraught. So he appeared first to her. But we know when he did this on the first Sabbath. Not on the first day of the week. He appeared on the first Sabbath, counting toward Pentecost. This passage is not telling us when he was risen. It's telling us when he appeared. The resurrection and the appearing took place on 2 separate days. Resurrected on Abib 16, he appeared on Abib 17. Again, I make a note that the word first, that the 2 words first are in this verse, and they're both translated from the Greek word protos, which means first. The word Mia is not used there. Any comment or question there? That if you move that comma, let's do that. Let's go back and move that comma. You look in Acts 16:9. When you read it as it's written, it says, Now when Yeshua was risen early, the first Sabbath, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he had cast 7 devils. Where the comma is right there, it seems like it's saying when Yeshua was risen early the first Sabbath, that he rose the first Sabbath. That's not what it says. Now when Yeshua was risen, comma, early that first Sabbath, he appeared first to Mary. How do we know that that's what it says? Because that's what verse 2 told us happened. That's when he appeared. He appeared to her on that first Sabbath. It's not establishing the day of his resurrection. It's establishing the day of his appearance. He was raised on Abib 16. All right. Acts 20. Correct understanding of Acts 20. I'm on page 7. To understand why verse 7 uses the phrase mioton Sabbaton in Acts 20, we have to back up one verse. So somebody read Acts 26 and 7.
And we sailed away from Philippi after the days of unleavened bread, and came unto them Taurus in 5 days, where we abode 7 days. And upon the first day of the week, when the disciples came together to break bread, Paul preached unto them, ready to depart on the morrow, and continued his speech until midnight.
All right. You see the word after in verse 6?
Yes, sir.
Translated from the Greek word meta, M-E-T-A. Meta means to accompany or to be with. It is often translated as after, but the meaning of one event that's associated with another event. Those two events are connected. The event of their selling from Philippi is associated with the event of unleavened bread. It is not telling you that unleavened bread is already passed. That is why it says they abode 7 days. How long does the Feast of Unleavened Bread last? 7 days. So it's letting us know that they sailed from Philippi. It was at the time of unleavened bread. And it's letting us know that they kept that feast. They stayed there for 7 days keeping that feast, eating unleavened bread. Mia, when used with the word Sabbaton, I'll make sure I say this correctly. When used with the word Sabbaton, reveals that the Sabbaths are being counted toward Pentecost. I can almost say without fail. There's one passage we're going to look at in a moment. It is possible that it's not connected with counting toward Pentecost, but it's also possible that it is. And the count always starts on the morrow after the holy Sabbath of unleavened bread. So verse 7 is telling us that on Sabbath number 1, counting toward Pentecost, after the waving of the sheaf on Abib 16, the disciples came together to break bread, and Paul preached to them. So, you understand? They sail. They start observing unleavened bread, which started when? 15th of Abib. On 16th of Abib, the sheaf is waved. After the 16th of Abib, there is a Sabbath that will come up. And it will be known as the first Sabbath because they're counting toward Pentecost. All right? So what this passage is letting us know is that on that first Sabbath, that's when they got together to hear Paul preach and teach. They didn't say, oh boy. What do I now? Yeah, thank you. It is good. The disciples didn't say, oh boy, he's resurrected on Sunday. We don't have to keep the Sabbath anymore. They'd have never thought that because the Sabbath is loaded with benefits. Right. It's a blessed day. Yeah. Yahweh blessed it above all days. Right. Wow. Benny and I were actually talking last night and talking about the peace that comes into a home when you start keeping the Sabbath. That's awesome. So they're not meeting on Sunday. They met on the first Sabbath counting toward Pentecost of that year. To think that this is a reference to a new day of worship is absurd. Shows a lack of understanding of the Moedim found recorded in Leviticus 23. It is an intentional mistranslation to establish a false doctrine, and it has worked. This mistranslation, because most people won't put forth the effort necessary to uncover it. All you got to do is take a strong. You don't even have to take a Strong's anymore. Just take a eSword program on your cell phone or on your laptop and look it up. And you see that Sabbaton does not mean the first day of the week. But by translating it first day of the week intentionally, they have established a false doctrine of Sunday gathering, and most people swallow it.
Right.
We move on now to 1 Corinthians 16. Someone read verse 2.
The first day of the week, Sabbaton, let every one of you lay by him in store, as Yahweh hath prospered him, and there be no gatherings when I come.
There are only two possible understandings here of the phrase Miaton Sabbaton. It could be a reference to Sabbath number 1, counting toward Pentecost. And I say that because Paul mentions that he's not coming to Corinth right away. I'm not coming right away. He says he's going to stay in Ephesus until Pentecost. 1 Corinthians 16:8, but I will tarry at Ephesus until Pentecost. So he could be writing to them before unleavened bread begins. He is expecting the believers in Corinth to also observe Passover, unleavened bread, and first fruits, and to begin their count. And he is telling them that on Sabbath number 1, after unleavened bread, counting toward Pentecost, to collect this offering. He could be doing that. That is not a far stretch, seeing that just 5 verses later, he mentions the word Pentecost. It's very possible that that's what he had in mind. But it's also possible that the word Mia here is used to mean certain, on a certain Sabbath. Luke 8:22. It came to pass on a certain day. Mia. The word translated certain there comes from the Greek word Mia. It came to pass on a certain day that he went into a ship with his disciples, and he said unto them, let us go over unto the other side of the lake, and they launched forth. This could just as easily read, now it came to pass on one day that he went into a ship with his disciples. So the word Mia can mean one. Most of the time means one, but there's no difference between the word one and certain. He went one day, or he went on a certain day. That certain day is one day. Right? That one day is a certain day.
Right.
It wasn't just any day, it was a certain day that he did that.
Right.
Not necessarily we know exactly what that date was. They just want us to know on a certain day, on one day, he got into the ship. Okay? Well, the same could very likely be true in 1 Corinthians 16:2, and I admit that. It's very possible that Paul's telling them to stop procrastinating about the offering, that he is telling them to choose one Sabbath, a certain Sabbath, and collect it. Choose a certain Sabbath and lay the offering aside. We know from other places that he was having trouble getting them to do this. They were boasting about doing it, but never were getting it done. So it's possible that he was saying, on a certain Sabbath, choose one, get it done, and get it done before I get there. But I like this next thing. It's also very interesting that the word kata, K-A-T-A, which is the Greek word that is translated upon in that verse, is translated as the word every. Kata is translated upon, but it's also translated as the word every 7 times in the Scriptures. 17 times in the Scripture. You're looking at 1 Corinthians 16:2. The first word is upon. It's the Greek word kata. It could mean every. 17 times it was translated as every. So if you use that translation of the word instead of the word upon, then the verse reads this way. Every one of the Sabbaths let every one of you lay by him in store, as Yahweh hath prospered him, that there be no gathering when I come. In other words, between now and the time I arrive, use every one of the Sabbaths between now and then to collect an offering. Every Sabbath when you come in, whatever Yahweh has prospered you with the week before, bring an offering of it and collect it so that it's laid up and ready for me when I get there, so that we don't have to do all of this when I arrive. Either way, it cannot, it's impossible, and it does not mean first day of the week. It means on a Sabbath. Now, we could sit here and discuss which Sabbath he's talking about, or whether he's talking about a bunch of Sabbaths, but the fact remains it does mean Sabbath. So here's the conclusion of the matter. The word Sabbaton never means anything other than Sabbath. There is no evidence anywhere that it does. The only evidence that the word Sabbaton can mean Sabbath is the false evidence created by mistranslations of the word in the 9 references that we just looked at above. Let me see if I can help us understand this. There are people that say, well, Mia ton Sabbaton means first day of the week, and I can prove it to you, and they'll take you to those 9 references. See, here it is, 9 times. It means first day of the week. Well, we've established those 9 times are mistranslations. So let's take those 9 times out and set them aside. We have established that they had an ulterior motive, because those 9 times, 8 of those 9 times, it's either dealing with the resurrection or it's dealing with the day they assemble. And they're wanting to get folks convinced they should assemble on the first day of the week. So you take those 9 times out and set it aside. Show me another place, anywhere, that Mia ton Sabbaton is translated first day of the week. There's not a place. Now, I was reading, some time ago, but I was reading where a guy was arguing, bless his darling heart. He was arguing that Mia ton Sabbaton does mean the first day of the week. And he was quoting references from 1990. See this guy right here on page 482, book written in 1990. He said it means first day of the week. You understand?